So I did have an introduction, talked about you and talked about the fashion colloquium that we are hosting in January. So it's a 5-day event from 26th to 30th, a lot of conversations, 60 plus researchers from all over the world. Around 12 plus countries are going to be representing in terms of conversations around responsible fashion. And understanding you're a youth icon and you've done your body of work in the last 4 years, you've been really an influencer and talking about sustainability and responsible fashion. I'm really keen to have a nice chat with you, get our viewers really engaged in the conversation. So definitely the word sustainability today itself has become quite a buzzword. But what really means to you and the youth perspective?
Yeah, for sure. For me, sustainability is not just a consumer act or just buying a product. Sustainability for me is a whole shift in the culture and how we kind of see our relationship to the earth, to resources, to labor. So when it comes to sustainability today, I think we need to make a differentiation because sustainability is not just sustaining systems how they existed thus far, because we know that's not inherently sustainable. For me, sustainability is going one step forward and thinking about how can we be regenerative in our practice. And if anything, instead of having lesser impact on the earth and our communities, how can we actually both of those things better than they were before? And so before we talk about sustainability as a product or an act, a lifestyle and a mindset that we adopt, which really demands a whole shift of the cosmology and culture.
Got it. So, your perspective is very, a fresh perspective, rather, I'd say, because following systems, making sure that you have, a zero waste kind of thing is something that's there. But bringing it from the culture perspective is something that's really important when we talk about sustainability. So understanding that the whole fashion landscape in India is changing on a very dynamic pace, have you been able to keep track of it?
Yeah, when it comes to India, I think it's quite interesting because I like to talk about India's fashion industry and how it was really impacted by British colonialism. Because I think the British Raj really created the foundations of the fast fashion model that we have today. Because when we think about Indian culture, we have our local tailors, we have our local artisans, that we have these local economies. We have certain textiles and practices that localize to certain regions, right? But during the British Empire, we really saw the first foundations of factories that were created to be sent, mass production goods to Westminster and Birmingham. And that whole model was rooted in cheap labor at a mass scale. And so even when we think about the resistance against the British and Gandhi's work, that was all rooted in returning to indigenous production. It was rooted in, creating our own khadi at home, not partake in these systems. So when I talk about India, I really like to kind of contextualize it to how things really changed because of colonialism. Because we really lost this idea of creating your own goods, not only as a symbol of resistance, but also your cultural roots. So now, when we talk about our contemporary world with the deregulated, neoliberal economy that we have this idea of the global race to the bottom, which is where global brands are looking at where they can go in this whole world to produce as cheap as they possibly can. And that means that the global south, which has already been displaced because of the legacy of colonialism, gets hurt. And so that's something we need to talk about, right? Because the communities that end up being at the back end of these factories are already marginal. Whether we're talking about women, we're talking about children, refugees, immigrants. So I think that's worth noting. There was actually a very interesting report that we sent out from SourceMap, which is a supply chain mapping software. And they saw that the supply chain of major brands today are literally the same routes as colonial trade routes for the height of the British Empire 150 years ago. So that's something we need to talk about because the way that the fashion industry is set up today is not a coincidence. It's very much piggybacking off the legacies of these systems that were created many years ago.
I think it's a very interesting perspective. What you've brought forth is the fast fashion and the colonialism that is actually hand in hand has actually created that kind of thing within a lot of colonies. So, considering India was a colony and even the other Commonwealth countries, and they're all under the fast fashion, impact. And probably because again of the cheap labor that the nations who were actually looking at doing more of production are probably wanting to put it into the market space. So very interesting. I think that's a very good point that you've brought in. And all the countries who've been colonies are the ones who are actually dumping grounds largely. So I think it's if you really look at it, so when we're looking at the governance aspect of it, it is rather the nations who are actually bringing, wanting production from these countries really need to address this rather than our countries, which would say the ones who were actually colonized. So the colonization is still in a very different format, but it is still there. And I think this is something that really we need to understand, because as young people, now we're talking about equality, we're talking about social justice. And I think it really becomes important that the youth today starts understanding that we are under a different kind of colonialism. Again, the imperial rule is still there. And wow, I think that's a very beautiful perspective that you've brought. And I think this can really sensitize the youngsters specifically. And because they are going to be the largest consumers, we have a huge population and our demographic dividend, today, when we say it's still not a dividend, it's only an advantage that we have. And it can only become a dividend if our youth actually gets present to this fact that we are actually encouraging them to do this to us. So I think this is very, thank you so much. It has completely touched me as well, what you said right now. Yeah.
I'm glad. Yeah, I think it's very important to understand how we all must become complicit in these systems that were not created for our own benefit. So it's really important that we take a step and really understand the legacies and histories that have created the system. It didn't come out of nowhere.
Understanding that you talked about Mahatma Gandhi, and this year we are celebrating 50th year of the Mahatma, and with his Khadi movement and the Swaraj movement, and talking about everything being done in house. As a nation, we've been a zero waste economy. Even if you look at our heritage, in every aspect of our lifestyle, there is there's a circular system that's very into the whole thing. So while the world is talking about circular economy, circular fashion, circular design, do you have some fresh perspective in terms of looking at some truly circular ideas that have come across, which could be, some inspiration for younger people who are actually wanting to take up design as a career? Because I feel a lot of young people are completely attracted to the glamour bit of fashion, and they feel that, this will stay always. And it's quite challenging. The industry is going through a meltdown, and the world is talking about, buying less, and who made my clothes kind of hashtags are really in the space. So do you see some, some interesting things that have come across to you in terms of...
Yeah, definitely. I always like to say that we need to return to our ancestral knowledge. When we think about the way that our communities have been living historically, we have always been sustainable, as you said. We've always been a zero-waste nation in our practices, right? So now talking about what young design, especially in India, to be thinking about, I think we're in a very interesting time where textile innovation, maybe it's not innovation, it's what we've always had, is a very important component. At the raw material level, we really need to look at the impacts that we're having. And so I think there's a very much an intentional return to natural fibers and fabrics in our clothing. Polyester, and really understanding that, yes, it's cheap, but what are the impacts that it's having on the microplastic level, things like that, or the health of it. So that's one part of it, is the raw material level. And the next part is, as I said before, your relationship to labor. So if you are based in India, you have proximity to your own communities in a way that you see their own livelihoods and you have more context. So think about it. If you are already in India, you already have a much more developed understanding of what regional craft practices are in certain regions and how those crafts are done. So So how can we revitalize these markets and craftsmanships that have always been there and have been so rich in their culture, but have been systemically, undermined because people want things as cheap as they can. And really returning to the fact that this is all a low fashion movement, and we have to, treat it as such. And then the last thing I would say is think about waste as a resource. Especially in India and a lot of the global south, there's huge levels of textile waste, or even just, runoff from factories that's polluting the Yamuna River and things like that. So it's really important for us to think about waste as a resource in the design process. I always liked this line. I don't remember what it is verbatim, but it's something along the lines of waste is a design flaw, right? So from our concept of our thinking, like how can we create a circular economy? But it really requires a very intentional approach about raw material, labor, and the end lifestyle of our products. You want something that's going to last. And when it is at the end of its life, how can it go back to this earth in a biodegradable way, not as poison to
I understand sustainable luxury is something that's really becoming in, where everybody wants to possess something that they can value now, rather than a use and throw kind of a culture, which probably everybody is talking about, that buying less, it would actually help us not do that. But on the other hand, we are looking at digital fashion becoming the big thing now, and the new technology, how it's going to actually change the entire landscape. How are you looking at that aspect? Because you are in the US, and I know that they are the forerunners in the space of technology, and on the other hand, you have a nation like India who's actually builds technology. So how do you look at this connection coming together?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of innovation happening right now about reimagining textiles that are plant-based. So an example I could give is like leather, right? Leather is something, vegan leather thus far has essentially been plastic. But there's a lot of innovation happening, even in California where I'm from, of creating plant-based leathers or lab-grown silk from spiders. So where there's a whole innovation there, really thinking about lesser impact fabrics, right? There's also being more intentional about digitally cut fabrics and how that could be less than waste. And given I am not a designer by trade, not my forte, but I think the conversation is growing, so the technologies are growing too, right? But I think the first thing is that designers have to demand a shift in their industry and really interrogate what has gone wrong so far and how we can reimagine tools to kind of address all of those needs.
Right. So you are a young woman, and we all know that the fashion industry is the largest employer of women on the planet. I don't know how factual it is, but that's what the conversation. And we are, as the textile and the fashion industry, specific in India after agriculture, is the largest revenue earner in terms of the GDP. And I think world over, and on the other hand, we are also the largest pollutant on the planet, right? The fashion industry. So there's a mix, challenge where it has the merits and the demerits that are going at the same time. So you being a young woman, and when you look at women and the fashion industry, what's your view on it? Because you've been a photojournalist as well. You're talking about lifestyle, you're a fashion consultant too. So where do you see this whole conversation in terms of?
For sure. Something that I've realized in my experience documenting a lot of garment workers around the world is there's so many similar patterns, right? We've really created this trope of a poor garment worker, maybe she's over the child, poor garment worker, right? That's the conception that we have. But take a step back, just like I did with the example about colonization. Really see, why is the fashion industry making it a point to employ the most marginalized communities, right? Whether we're talking about immigrants and refugees, indigenous people, like here in LA, we see a lot of indigenous garment workers coming to downtown LA from Central America because of the political strife there. So you see a lot of intersections between communities that have been inherently marginalized. And I think part of that is that fashion industry as it exists now has normalized exploitation. Sometimes I think back, I'm why is it that sustainable fashion is oh, look at us doing things ethically? that's something we should pat our backs about, whether like it should be the norm, right? But that's the thing. This industry is so broken that the fashion industry normalizing labor exploitation, which means that we need to look at the political lens, because all these communities that are inherently marginalized are further being like vulnerable to these industries. And so a large part of my recent work in LA has been more on the labor organizing front, educating garment workers about their rights, educating them about how they should step up against corporate powers, because at the end of the day, garment workers don't have that agency and knowledge of how to create systems. We're doing something wrong as an industry, because that's the heart of this movement, the garment workers. Right? And we really need to think about how can we empower that. And there is no one size fits all, because so much industry in India, like the nuances of who the workers are is going to be different from who it is here in LA. Like here in LA, it's a lot of undocumented immigrants that don't have papers and are threatened with deportation, which is a whole other can of worms. But that's the thing, is like, no matter who you are entitled to dignity in the workplace. So how can we push that form? And it comes to of consumers and workers who really need to get together and demand change for corporate powers would have profited off for way till.
Interesting. So you've covered issues like environment, you've talked about culture, you've talked about heritage, you've talked about women, you talked about the marginalized communities. So seeing that how inclusive fashion is, the impact is so large. And I have seen, because while I talk to a lot of people, they really want to, not talk about fashion still. Yet everybody wants to possess fashion, but they still don't want to give the due credit to the fashion industry or the fashion education. So where do you see this, especially in a country like India, and when we have textile as the largest GDP earner as well, and the retail sector completely thrives on clothing and accessories that get into the fashion business. What is your say here when you look at people who are even wanting to take up fashion education? How important it is to understand fashion and have an education which can really, shape the future of the fashion industry in the direction that's required.
Mm-hmm. So are you thinking about like inclusivity in the fashion industry, and who needs to continue that narrative? Is that your...
So, considering that it has a really a wider impact in terms of inclusivity, right, from communities to women to, the revenue, the economy, in terms of the employment opportunities. So if you look at the whole perspective of the fashion, it is very inclusive. Yet people are, they have a stigma around fashion. And they don't want to, everybody wants fashion, but they still don't want to recognize the importance of fashion. Yeah. So where do you see this? Because especially in a country like India, it's a huge barrier, because I connect with young people, their parents all the time who are wanting to take, their young students who want to get into the fashion industry, want to learn design or want to get into the clothing space. And the parents have this apprehension, that this is not a good industry, or maybe, the opportunities aren't enough, So where do you see this whole conversation in terms of looking at how we can really bring the right brand image to the fashion industry itself? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. I mean, the fashion industry has such a negative connotation for good reason, right? Because it has been so exploited on multiple levels. But I think that's the thing, is we really need to start seeing fashion for how political it is. Because it's not like fashion is frivolous, and if you're buying it, you're just creating goods that no one's going to care about. Like, this is an industry that has huge impacts on the livelihood to the environmental impact. We need to see it as such. You just need to read the stats of just how many people the fashion industry employs, to the fact that it's one of the biggest contributors of carbon emissions and the footprint on the environment. Like, this is all very important. We need to talk about that, right? So the fashion industry has to go under a major metamorphosis. Like, we know that it's happening. If we don't, it's not going to survive under the conditions that it's going into. So it's like, to enter the fashion industry now is to be a part of this global conversation, no matter where you are. And if anything, I feel like the countries which have been impacted by colonialism, especially, should really be encouraging that we need to be leading the conversation around sustainability because it's always been inherent to our culture, right? So it should be on our communities to kind of reimagine those, be like, how can we create an industry that doesn't come at the expense of our communities and our own environment?
I think you're a great spokesperson, and very fluent in your conversation in terms of fashion, though, your stint with the fashion industry is not that long, but it seems you've been completely cued into it and you've been really enjoying the space. And if I would like, just a word to the youth and the people today, Insta is a space where everybody is there, right? So people want to be really, cool, be on Insta. So you have the youngsters who are there, and then you have the middle-aged people who are parents, right? Who are actually guardians. So, these are the two segments, I'd like you to just give your thoughts on it, that, what is the new direction that they can actually look at in terms of, because again, the purchasing is what gets into the fashion industry the most,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I love to look at how older generations really consumed, right? Because if you look at what the current generation is consuming, it's very disposable, it doesn't last long. But what are all the pieces that have been passed down from our mothers and grandmothers, right? There's an inherent quality to that in heirloom pieces. And it's not just about the quality, it's the fact that it's almost like an artifact of our culture. So if we could return to a time where we could really think about how this is not a fleeting piece or a product, but something that can really speak to old generations, right? We're really thinking about classics and timelessness, but how our own identities is kind of tied into all that. So I think it's very much a conversation that transcends different generations and transcends borders, right? But we really need an intentional approach of how we can bring everyone into this conversation, because the fashion world has been very exclusionary, it's been very exploitive, and so that's what we really need to be looking at. And doing that means that we have to look at our own histories and say how this has not been the norm. You have to look back 150 years, and I talk about colonialism so much because I think that's a conversation that isn't being had enough, but has had huge effects on the state of our current industry.
I fully agree with you, because it has shaped our mindsets, That's something that the West brings in is just the good, the part. And, if fast fashion came, probably it's again good, because they have brought in. So I think somewhere we need to really give up. And I think that's a great connection that you've brought in, because it's all about altering mindsets. And today, if the whole conversation around sustainability or being responsible is something that if we can bring into a mindset, each one of us, I think it would really make sense. And, we will be able to further the cause of, about our environment and our whole existence and the other issues around it. So thank you, Aditi. It was a beautiful conversation with you, and look forward to stay in touch. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Do hashtag a design thinker and the Arch College while you are next time doing conversations around it. I'll be happy to stay connected. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. Have a great fun.
And look forward to have you at the Colloquium. Maybe if you can make it to India at that point of time. 26th to 30th of Jan, we are hosting a panel at the Jaipur Literature Festival too, at that point of time. Yes. And so again, to wrap up, the Fashion Colloquium actually was initiated by the 4 prominent institutions in 4 important locations of the globe, which was London, Milan, Paris and New York, where the fashion weeks were actually, shaping up the fashion. So then they were looking at the emergence of the new fashion locations across the globe. So it was Brazil and, China and now with India, it's been a decade almost, and more than around 12 plus colloquiums have happened across the globe. And with India, we are opening the series on responsible fashion and responsible future. So it's going to be an exciting time, and our students are clearly completely working on Khadi, understanding it's even, we are very closely connected with our roots as well at the institution. So if you can make it over to India at that point of time, it's going to be exciting. Yeah.
Yes, I will email you, and we'll continue this conversation. I would love to come back.
Thank you. Thank you so much.